Miles, Gary, welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Thanks for coming in all the way from Oregon for this interview, right?
That's right. Oregon and more these days, Hawaii.
Hawaii. Now you're making us all very jealous. Going in, we have antipathy. We're here under the missiles and you live in Hawaii.
Well, it's interesting because I was commenting on that. I said to my wife, we live in Hawaii. We need it because we work worldwide.
In conflict regions.
Incredible tensions. And then we go back to this very peaceful place.
I was in the desert yesterday.
Oh,
so
good.
yeah.
You need it. You need to be able to take breaks.
Yeah, and also no one fires at the desert. No one shoots missiles at rocks. So we had a little break. So tell me a little bit about you. Let's begin by grounding the conversation in where you each come from. So what first drew you to work with conflict, and not just as something to fix, but something to really understand and transcend? We can start with you, Miles.
Yeah, well, the same thing that drew me to conflict is what actually, in a weird way, drew me to live here in Israel.
Because you're from...
I'm from Dallas,
Okay.
Dallas, Texas originally. And then when I was 26, I moved to Japan. I lived there for 8 years, studying Aikido, which is usually translated as the way of harmony. But actually, it's the way of conflict, because the harmony would be the byproduct of Aikido done well, or of conflict resolution done well, or effectively, I should say. The byproduct is some type of harmony, or certainly some type of coherence. And when I was younger, I was doing it really for the kind of the martial arts part of it, but I was always interested in the spiritual aspect of it. And as I grew in the art, became better, faster, stronger, I started realizing that there's a glass ceiling there in terms of some type of spiritual breakthrough. And that's when I started going more into meditation. And after 8 years in Japan, I went to Burma to do Vipassana meditation there. And
silent meditation retreats.
Yeah, and over 8 years, I did a total of 3 years worth of silent retreat there. And my teacher was big on purifying the mind. And interestingly enough, I had developed myself physically with the martial art of Aikido, which is somehow spiritual martial art. Then I developed the mind through Vipassana, as you know. But I was also starting to realize that the heart area, the kind of the shadow work area, the psychology work area, I was studying it intellectually, but I realized at a certain point that I needed to turn into my own therapeutic process. And what I came to understand after years of doing all three of those paths or perspectives is that the focus is going to be different, but the process is the same. In other words, like in Aikido, it's a relational art, and you're finding the conflictual energy and working with that. In meditation, you sit down and don't do anything, and you're going to run into your own inner wars soon enough. And it's the same process of, having that ability to take a perspective and differentiate your awareness. And then when I started doing my own therapeutic work, I realized that, therapeutic process, as you probably know, doesn't really get touched in meditation. Meditation is therapeutic, but when you work with a therapist, you realize that you're doing a different type of work. So, years of pursuing these three paths, it just kind of became what I was about in my own process. And when I first started coming to Israel, it was the second Intifada. I was invited to teach Aikido here, and it was crazy. I don't know if you were here, but we all remember those days. That's when I first met Gary, by the way. He was here teaching a workshop. And I said, there's no way I could live here. It's just too crazy for me. And then as I sat with the question more and more, looking at what I do and who I am, it's like there's no way I could not live here. So it was a much longer process, but from that point I decided to settle here and open an Aikido school, which I have in Tel Aviv. And so Aikido, meditation, and conflict resolution are my three kind of core practices, and that's what I do with people.
Yeah. So you really came to the heart, to the world's beating heart of conflict.
That's right. That's right. Yeah.
The deep shadow and light of this world. What about you, Gary? What drew you to conflict? What is it about conflict, whether personal, familial, or societal, or global, that really drew you?
First of all, I grew up, in a Jewish family where a very extended family where there was always, our house was full of relatives, everybody screaming and whatever. Somebody once asked me, how do you do Jewish, Israeli, Palestinian conflict work? And you seem so fine in the middle of it. And I said, you weren't at my breakfast table.
Mm-hmm.
So I grew up with that. And then as part of my psychological training, I became a Gestalt therapist.
Mm-hmm.
After the founder of Gestalt died, I went and lived in his community for many years, and we were just conflictual. We were like the most conflictual people. Couldn't figure out why my relationships didn't go so well and why I didn't have very many clients.
Mm-hmm.
And then I ran into this man, Arnold Mindell, who was the founder of process-oriented psychology. He was from Zurich and was one of the most popular Jungian analysts there after Jung died. And he just started coming to Oregon, of all places. And he had a different style. He developed all these methods of working on conflict and working on world conflict. He worked with different presidents of the United States in the background. He worked with different presidents of countries in Europe. He was involved with the United Nations. So he was doing conflict work on every level. So that motivated me. And Israel, how I got involved here, is an amazing story. One of the parts of our work is we work with people in comas. It's a very specialized psychological training, working with people in comatose states. And there was a general's son in Israel about 30 years ago who was in a coma and somehow heard about me. And so I came, and I'm doing this very intense coma work. It was very intense. Like, you know, the parents were divided. One liked it. The other wanted us to stop. They were in conflict. The hospital was in, everything was in conflict. And finally I got a break. And I got this call from this woman saying, I've heard about your ability to work with conflict, and I'm coming to talk to you today. And I said, well, I'm going to be in the water, in the ocean. And she said, where? And so
Let's have a meeting in the ocean.
So I'm out swimming, and I see this woman in her dress swimming out to me. And she said, I need you to come to Haifa tonight and work with Palestinians and Israeli Jews on conflict. And I said, you've got to be kidding me. And she said, no, it's tonight. And that was the beginning of 30 years of doing this work. There was one other really big piece. When I was young, right at the beginning of coming here, about 30 years ago, I was relatively young, and I was having troubles in my marriage. And I saw this sign in the old city that said, if you need some help, call this special mystic and he'll take you where near the wall you have to go for like a vision quest. So I go on vision quest, and I'm sitting there meditating, help me with my marriage, come on. And all of a sudden I had this incredible vision, and it said, you're meant to do something healing the wars between the world's religions. And I said, I don't know anything about the wars between the world's religions. What do I do with my marriage? And they said, that's not where it's at. And I got that answer about 10 times. You're meant to do something. And so that dedicated me to doing that, not only here, but in many, many parts of the world, working with really big conflicts, working with healing historical trauma, and especially the wars between religions and what happened to the original spirit under a lot of those religions, which was more one of connection and peace and things like that.
So now that we understand your foundations a little bit more, I'd love for each of you to introduce your approach in terms of a beginner or a lay person who doesn't know much about Aikido or about your therapeutic processes. What is the core of your work?
I guess a very simple, but maybe over simplistic, but simple's good. A way to look at that is moving from a dissonance to resonance, which is already starting to connect with that which is being dissociated from, and then from resonance to coherence. Coherence is when we fully become whole. And, I think energetically we can all connect with that. We all know what dissonance is. We feel it. Just open the news these days, certainly here in Israel. We've been through 19 months now of dissonance. Yeah, it's crazy, But the fact is, underneath that, we're kind of living in dissonance. We're living in a split. So the movement, the healing process is actually turning away from the external stressors, which, okay, the huti or whatever, and turning into the internal stressors. Because the external stressors are the triggers, but what's being triggered inside of me is something that's not healed.
So Gary, your therapeutic method is process-oriented psychology. That's really where your expertise lays. Can you tell us a little bit about that? Maybe specifically in relation to the current conflict. I mean,
Sure.
You've been around for a while. How is process-oriented psychology relevant for our times? And also I'm wondering, how have these times affected you, and how have your tools helped you in dealing with whatever you might have felt in the last 19 months?
Mm-hmm. Those are great questions. So process-oriented psychology is a mind, body, spirit approach. And it unifies like all the different ways of working with people. So we work with dreams, with body symptoms, with relationship, with family. I developed the family therapy there. I developed a lot of the intimacy and sex therapy. We work with coma patients. But there's a whole part of our work called world work. And that's where conflict work lies. World work is conflict work, organizational development, and leadership training. Before I go there, I just have to mention also part of our connection is I've also been doing, certainly at Miles level, but I've been doing Aikido for about 19 years. And for me, Aikido was the embodiment of our principles. The reason I study Aikido so much is that even though they're wonderful psychological principles, they're more in the head and in the emotions, but you really need to be able to embody conflict resolution, right? So there's two different main ways of working with conflict in process work. Working with individuals and organizations, we have two main methods that sound very simple and are not easy to do, but they're easy to describe. The first is a 3-step method. That was the original method in process work. That means that in a conflict, I need to develop fluidity. It's the same thing we do in Aikido, right? When we blend and we move. So I need to really be able to take my side, and a lot of people can't do that, especially with emotion. And once I take my side, I need to be able to get fluid and come over on your side, and not only sort of repeat what you're saying, but look into your signals in your body and sort of dream into what you're feeling and make sure that's right. Once I really take your side, then I can go back and work on the conflict. If I get stuck, I take the third position, which is more that meditative, empty mind, that neutral place where I'm just studying what's happening. Sounds easy. It's not. It's my wife, who's out listening, used to say, I've never seen anybody do conflict work like you in public. What happens when you get home, right? Because when it gets real and it's hot, and the closer you are to somebody, the more, like in martial arts, you would say, the more your vulnerable points are available. It's tricky. Now, I think we do really good with it. But it's all of those positions. Some of us are better at taking our side. Some of us are better at taking the other side. And I've even used this approach where somebody wanted to kill me. Somebody was convinced they should kill me.
How did you know this person wanted to kill you?
They called me at home. I was living way out in the country, and there was somebody who had my last name who had beaten their brother up in a drug deal. And no matter how much I tried to convince them that I wasn't a drug dealer, I was a psychologist, and I didn't even know the tavern they were talking about, they kept saying, I'm coming to get you. And I said, I'll call the police. And they said, we know where you live. You're way out in the country. The police can't get there. And I said, I'll protect myself. And they said, not against the weapons we're bringing. So I thought, well, what am I going to do? So I remembered that I had just learned this conflict work method. And so I used it. I said, let me take your side. I said, my God, if I have a brother, if somebody did that to my brother, I'd want to hurt him too. And then I did the next thing, which I picked up their energy. And I said, so I'm coming. I said, I'll meet you in front of the sheriff's office. And if it's me, you can kill me. And if it's not me and you try to hurt me, you're in trouble. And I said, so I'm on my way. You better be ready for me. So I picked up the energy, and the guy said to me, mister, you sound a little like you're crazy. You're kind of scaring me, And I said, I'm on my way. You better be ready. And he said, I don't think I have the right person. And I said, well, I tried to tell you that. And he said, well, I'm so sorry I interrupted your supper. And I said, well, that's okay. Let's talk about brothers, that we both have brothers. So here we are. I'm talking to like my potential murderer. And I thought, this stuff is powerful. This stuff is powerful. And so that's the method that we train in for years. And you just keep working on your resistance to it. And one of the things that helped me the most was when I learned Aikido. Because then I finally got to the point where I was non-reactive in my body. So you can try to say I'm taking your side, but I'm like adrenalized up. And but in Aikido, it teaches you a different kind of centeredness.
Yeah.
So then we developed, in the last 10 years, a method we call 4-phase, which is really flowing with conflict. Where is the conflict? Is it time to avoid? Like a lot of the people and a lot of that I try to talk to here about the conflict are in phase 1. They're avoiding. They're in shock. They need to be. They're avoiding. Phase 2, you go right into the conflict and have it out. Phase 3 is more this other side where you see the other as a part of you and you try to take their side and you get fluid. And phase 4 is more this meditative place where you meditate, you become one with the earth or with the sky or with the universe, and you use that meditative state not to just transcend, but to work right on the middle of the hottest conflict. I call it having a cool head to sit in the fire. One other thing we do is called group process. Group process looks like therapy with one person. I've done it with up to about 700 people at once. It's very intense. And one of the things that Mindell said, the founder of process work, he said war is powerful. He said war makes people bring up everything inside of them and use all of their power. And we have to have a method that can compete with it. You can't just tell people to chill out. So when we do group process, it has that kind of intensity. And the basic theory is that what we do in the room in group process doesn't have to happen on the street. That we work on this atmosphere that we call the field. And you can feel the field. If you're really tuned into that, when I was flying into Israel, I could feel that field 20 minutes before I landed.
Yep.
Right? You can feel it.
Yeah, totally.
Right? And it's everywhere. So what we do is we...
What is it? Is it the field of repressed rage? Is it the
everything.
field
I could feel
shame,
dissonance.
guilt?
I could feel all of it. I could feel the heaviness, the depression. Since I had been here 2 years ago, you can feel what it's like, the amount of tension,
The fear,
and
the anxiety.
fear
It's in
and
the air,
anxiety.
yeah.
And what you do in group process is you call that in, and you work with
Awesome.
it.
Awesome.
So
Yeah.
those are some tools.
I can relate to that as a mother, and it is probably very different than what you're describing. But when you were talking, I just picture myself with my middle daughter, who is beautiful angel, and recently has been having big internal emotions, and it's like a storm in my house.
Yes.
And I have to somehow meet that.
That's right.
And it brings up so much in me. It meets me in my most wounded places.
That's right.
And I'm so grateful for the little bit of, or the lot of bit of therapy and mindfulness that I did, because
Yes.
I have that ability in the moment to feel how much rage there is in my body, how much I want in that moment to destroy her when she behaves in a way that mirrors some of the ways that I was made to feel. Very much getting triggered, and then being able to use that. This is me, this is my body, I'm going to protect my body, and so this is my boundary. This is what you can't do. And at the same time, I'm also coming around to you, to kind of really empathizing and being able to see, wow, you have all these big emotions, and you really want to,
right.
you really want to hit your mama right now, don't you? And,
That's right.
and coming around and having that multi-dimensional view of this conflict, which is no longer just this kind of like nucleus of wounding that we can sometimes get caught up in. And so that's where most of my work is
You're
done.
doing it.
I'm doing it. But what I realize is that a lot of it still gets stuck in the body. So, I obviously can't take it out on my daughter. And so in many instances, I am left with a body that needs to express some kind of rage or shame or guilt.
What you're saying, though, is a big step, because one of the things we are teaching in relationship trauma work is that a lot of the psychological approaches said if you get triggered, go for it. Maybe not on your kid, but maybe with your husband or your partner or your best friend. Just let it loose. And the trauma-informed work is not like that. It's like, you trigger me, I've got to find a way to do my work, right? I can't take it out on my kid, but if I take it out on my partner too much, I'll burn up the relationship. So then it's like, where do we go then to release things from the body, right? Where do you go to let go of all that? If you can't burn it on your kid or your partner's back, where do you burn it?
Yeah. And so a lot of people, I mean, it's not just in parenthood, right? A lot of people will feel all this kind of like repressed rage at the news or at what they imagine people are projecting onto them. And then they take it out in the street, on the bus, if they're in the army, on the other side, if they're on social media, writing horrible things.
That's right.
And so I think that's maybe where we can connect it with our lived experience, and also coming back to that idea that those initial feelings are valid. The rage, the shame, the guilt, the wanting to destroy, the projecting onto the other, those are all valid, real, welcomed emotions. They just need an outlet and a place where they're not going to create further polarization and conflict. So for me, I found it a little bit in yoga. I guess I have to try Aikido now. We talked about Watsu before starting the recording, water therapy, where I can really kind of, my nervous system just goes into a embryonic state. But I'm wondering with you said it, you came into Israel, you felt this divisive, wounded, depressed, anxious, fearful energy. But I think it's something that we can feel at this point anywhere in the world, right? In the United States, I mean, I don't have to tell you how divided things are in the rest of the world.
Yes, polarized everywhere.
Yes. And I'm wondering, like, how has this period been for you?
I've got meditation as a refuge. It's been my greatest resource. The biggest challenge for me has, of course, the wars has been devastating. But as an American, to see the polarization in society has hurt me personally more than anything else. And a part of me really wants to understand it, so I really kind of go into trying to understand the dynamics at play and how all the ideologies and the politics are playing out. I mean, I just kind of have an interest in that. But on a personal level, it's like, okay, why does this hurt me so much? Why is it so painful? I'm kind of a classic liberal. I would guess Gary as well. He's a bit older than me, but we have about a 10 years difference. But kind of with that generation when it's like, wow, the world's getting better. There's a lot of bright hope here. And now, who would have thought, that we'd be in this place, and also to see my fellow liberals, and friends, turn on Israel. There's a lot of valid criticism for Israel. My God, in Tel Aviv every Saturday night there's huge protests going on. But I also think there's a lot of unfounded criticism and misinformation, and yeah, that's been the biggest pain, So now that's a dynamic, right? Now what do we do? I don't know, but I do know this. I knew that inner conflict inside of me that's ripping me apart inside. That's my responsibility, and that's my work. So I have to have the ability to take refuge and get out of that, or else I'll be a mess. I'll burn out. So I do have that, but I also have to lean into it, and as part of my own process. One of the things about Aikido that's exceptional about Aikido, as opposed to other martial arts, is that it's a positive sum martial art. Zero-sum martial arts, there's always a winner and a loser. Aikido, at least in philosophy and principle, it's a positive sum martial art where you bring together these conflicting energies from a place of centered awareness, and connecting to the conflict, and staying open. And something may emerge from that. It's the same thing in therapy. Something may emerge from that would be more coherent. And all the bells and whistles, all the survival instincts inside of me want to fight, flight, and freeze. And I still have that place of choice. I can choose how to respond. Now, how do I respond to that? I don't know. But I do know that fight, flight, freeze just perpetuates. And we get more of the same. But if I can stay with all my triggers and all the bells and whistles that are telling me to, fight, flight, freeze, and stay connected and open and listen, then I will be available for the emerging solution, for the healing. And that's actually what conflict resolution is about. You can't predetermine conflict resolution. You can't predetermine therapeutic healing. Right. You have to fully give yourself to the process. You have to surrender to the process. And when the conditions are right, miraculously the healing happens. So that's something I work with people to do. I do it in my own life. I have good days where it happens all the time. I have days where it doesn't happen at all. But it's all a dialectic. To stay with that dialectic is I think, the most important thing.
So, Gary, what about you? How have the past few years, situation in the United States and Israel, how has it affected you personally?
I remember several years ago, I went to my teacher, Arnold Mindell, and I said, I'm not going back to the Middle East anymore. I'm not making enough of an impact. And he was very non-directive usually around, just reflect on it. And he said, oh, yes, you are. It's one of the few times he told me that. And I said, but I'm co-facilitating with a Palestinian facilitator. She attacks me at the beginning of every workshop. I'm just not going back. He said, yes, you are. He said, certain processes are so huge that maybe in your lifetime you won't see the results that you want, but you will move the process. That was really, I go back to that all the time. Keep going. You never know. There was one time we were working here in one of the Arab villages in Israel, and in the middle of the seminar, the mayor came and grabbed me out. I said, I can't go. I'm in the middle of seminar. You have to come. And we went to a protest tent, and we facilitated. And afterwards, he wrote me, and he said, that facilitation stopped what probably would have been a riot. So you make a step, and you make a step, and you make a step. And people have to understand that. I once ran into a funder at a party, and I had helped this funder's family a lot. And he said, let's do something for you. He said, I just came from a meeting with Bill. I said, who's Bill? Bill Gates. And he said, and we gave some musicians, they had nice guitars, we gave them hundreds of thousands of dollars. What can I do for you? And I said, set me up, I want to make a center in Jerusalem where we work on the conflict year round. He said, have you been there in the last year working? And I said, yes. And he said, well, we're not giving you anything because I don't see that you fixed the problem. That's the little view of conflict work. The big view is that how long has this been going on? And we just got to keep chipping away at it. So one of the ways I cope is I'm an action person. And so first I just feel things and I just suffer. I watch every day as much news as I can tolerate. And I scream and I yell and I cry and I process it. But what really helps for me is I have to do something. So I come here. Also from home, I'm on Zoom. All the time I'm training trauma therapists in the Ukraine, and I'm supporting them. I train trauma therapists in Bethlehem. I train trauma therapists in Israel. Wherever I can reach out in a non-political way to trauma people, I train them because that helps, right? Because people experience so much trauma in these areas. I remember I was here about 10 years ago at a conference in Tel Aviv. And one of the speakers there said that 50% of the children in Israel and 75% of the children in Palestine have post-traumatic stress syndrome. That's an enormous figure. And that's before all of this current trauma. So the one thing I know I can do is I can teach conflict work skills, and I can say, come on, people, nobody wins in war. You think you win, but everybody has so much trauma. There are really no winners. So we've got to find a way to conflict that differs from war. But in the meantime, we've got to work with trauma. And we've got to give people a place to deal with hopelessness and to eventually find hope. So I think that's what I do. And also I up my self-care. I do more Aikido.
More watts.
I get more body work. I do more. I'm a runner. I run further. And I try to take more meditation time. It's really important because the caregivers get wiped out. I was just talking to some caregivers in Israel since here, and they say, oh my God, they're out there working with the families of the hostages. They're out there working with the soldiers. Say, my God, I'm so full of trauma.
Yeah.
I'm having constant flashbacks, this thing of secondary trauma when you're a healer. Mm-hmm. So I'm into healing the healers because we've got to have somebody who's still present that you can go to, right?
Mm. Well, there's a few points there. First of all, I love the fact that you said that you take in as much news as you can, because that is the complete opposite to what almost every guest on this podcast has said is, reduce your news consumption, don't be on social media, which of course is impossible to do because we live in this world where all the forces are at play to grab our attention towards the horror, towards the division.
Towards the outrage, yeah.
Towards the outrage, exactly. So I like what you said, that if already you're going to be engaging with this news, well, maybe let out these internal voices that you're feeling, scream at the television, wail at your smartphone. So that's, first of all, I'm going to take that on. My neighbors are going to have some qualms about that maybe, but I'm gonna try to take that on. And the second thing, which I really appreciate, and that's something I keep coming back to, is in order for us to be able to live through this time, I think not enough people are realizing how traumatized we all are, and not giving ourselves enough grace to say, my God, nobody in this world should be going through any of the things that you're going through. It doesn't matter if, like me, you're a mom in Tel Aviv and, you have a few sirens, or if you're someone in Gaza, God forbid, or you're a soldier in reserve duty, or you're the mother of a soldier in reserve duty, or, you're a person on the right wing who thinks such, horrors, etc., of people on the other side because you've been fed that, or, vice versa. Nobody should be going through this. So give ourselves some grace and maybe just up our self-care. How wonderful would that be if just people would take a few more minutes to breathe, to walk, to Aikido, to, look up at the sky, whatever it is, move that energy in our bodies. I want to go a little bit deeper into kind of actual conflict work because, like I said, self-care, being aware of our trauma and working through it is already going to not only benefit ourselves, but benefit our society, in the sense that if I'm more regulated, of course, I'm less likely to snap at my kids and my husband, at the neighbor, and they're less likely to snap, et cetera, right? It's a butterfly effect. But we haven't talked about compassion yet. When we are so much in that fight, flight, freeze mode that, Miles, you talked about, Gary, you talked about feeling that energy in Israel of anxiety and kind of primal fear. It's so hard to access the parts of our brain which are able to feel anything for people who are outside of your tribe, for people that you are told want to hurt you. So I imagine that conflict work, part of it is trying to empathize, trying to understand the other side. I'm not even talking about, trying to understand Hamas, but trying to understand the average Palestinian, maybe the society that they grew up in, the messaging that they grew up with, the trauma that was inflicted on them, not only by Israeli forces, but maybe within their family, a patriarchal society. So first of all, a lot of people are not willing or able to do that. But beyond being able to kind of empathize that they grew up in a certain way, etc., for me to feel compassion at this point for anyone else when I am suffering, and so I'm in fight flight and I'm worried about my kids' safety, seems almost impossible. So is that even something that you're attempting at this point? Is that something that you think is part of our conflict work, or does it start with those steps of, putting a hand on my own heart and saying, like, I'm safe right now? Is that part of conflict work?
First of all, in phase work, the idea is that you don't push people into that phase 3, which is the compassionate phase. You support them more to be in phase 2.
Nice.
And then they naturally...
When phase 2 is...
Go ahead and take care of yourself, be on your side, stand for your people,
It's all valid, what you're going through.
All valid. Yeah. Really go for it. Do it even more. And then you watch for the natural little threads that start to then move naturally into compassion. And so I have people who are mad at me. Some of my Aikido teachers are big supporters of Trump. You shouldn't study with that person. No, that person just called me a week ago and told me they love me. I'm not going to just box them out because of that. And so it's a kind of training. It's a kind of, for me, it's like Aikido training. You know, in Aikido, the first times people attacked me for the first years, I just was going to react. My teacher could say, stop that. Not my body was going to do it. And something shifted. And there's something like that, like several people, even since I've been in Israel, I said, well, are you like on the wrong side? Why are you willing to train therapists on both sides? And I said, but...
Do you get that more from Palestinians or from Israelis?
Israelis.
Like how can you talk to Palestinians at this point?
Why are you willing to train Palestinian trauma therapists? You're a traitor. You're on the wrong side. And I said to them, no. I said, if you're a doctor and somebody's bleeding to death, you don't ask them.
That's right.
Are you Palestinian? Are you Israeli? Are you whatever? You stop the bleeding. That's my position, that I'm not going to stop teaching healing work. And I said, and also think about this. Are you really doing good by not helping the other side cope with their trauma? Because the more traumatized people are, the more dangerous they are. The more they want to strike out, the more they're triggered. So I said, trauma training, compassion to the other side, is a safety maneuver. It's a safety maneuver. And so I want to get people to see that being compassionate to the other side is not violating your side. It actually protects your side. The more that person is wounded, the more dangerous they are. The more you put that person down, the more they're going to come back at you. One of our Aikido teachers, Hiroshi Ikeda Sensei, is one of my teachers. He's just teaching that all the time. He said, winning and fighting is an illusion because you're eventually going to find somebody who's going to catch you off guard. You're going to find somebody stronger than you. So just fighting is not enough. Teaches to us. He teaches us to always be connected. You never break the connection, right? When somebody's attacking you, you stay connected. That's kind of like an act of compassion, right? But again, you can't push that on people. If somebody needs to stay disconnected and just stand for their people and their side, great. But watch yourself. Watch when you get tired of that. You know the thing that's most hopeful for me being here this time is because I come in and out, I feel the pulse. And I've been here years before where I've heard people on one side or both sides ready for war, almost excited for it. And what I hear from both sides now is it's reached a point that I keep hearing people on both sides saying, we are so exhausted by this, it has got to stop. And so that's like following nature. Don't skip those signals. When you feel more compassionate, give to your compassion. When you're exhausted with fighting, open up to something new. It's just following process.
So how does this work look like in practice? Do you work with groups of how many people? And then the next question is, imagining you had all of Israel and all of Palestine, Palestinians kind of listening to you right now, and you had the opportunity to do some process work with them. What would that look like? What does it look like in practice?
I mean, I work with groups from 7 or 8 people to most of my training groups are about 25 people. And I've worked with the last big world work I facilitated at was in Greece, and there were 720.
And so those are usually people who are at odds with each other or at conflict?
A lot of at odds with each other. Mm-hmm. The conflicts are nonstop. They're really intense. We have people show up from 40-something countries. So you can imagine the level of conflict, right?
So everyone's in a group, they're in a circle. How does it work?
They're in a circle, and we facilitate. Sometimes we create positions in the room. You're on this side, you're on this side. Let's start there. We encourage people when they're ready to take the other side and at least stand there and feel what it's like. And then we facilitate. We catch when it goes hot, and we hold it at the hotness so it doesn't get too hot. We catch when it gets cool, and we don't let people skip that. We bring in the hidden roles. Like, for example, if I'm working in Israel and everybody gets up and says, well, there's no terrorists in the room, we bring in the role of the terrorist so you can process it. Or if we say somebody's talking about Trump or Netanyahu, we represent them so you can interact with that figure. And we just go deeper and deeper, and we hold and we hold and we hold with awareness. And incredible transformations happen. Maybe I can tell one quick story from the past here. To protect their identities, I have to watch what I say. But let's just say that there were two women who both had a lot of power on both sides and were connected with very powerful people. And they were in my seminar, and they hated each other. They hated each other. And we facilitated and facilitated and facilitated. They
when
became
you say facilitated. Does that mean they're both talking?
They're talking.
Their
they're
side
sharing. We're
arguing.
They're on this side in a group and that side, and they're going at each other. And then during the breaks, we're watching and we're helping provide opportunities to connect. These women became such close friends that they made a video about their friendship. They made sure one way or another they got across the border to see each other. And I've seen so many examples of that. And so if I were to say something to the whole of Israel and Palestine, I would say, what gives me chills? I would say war is devastating, both sides. I listen to both sides. Everybody's suffering. Nobody's winning. There is so much trauma. Let's instead start meeting with facilitated group processes in every region. Let's try something different. We've got to do something new. The paradigm of war is trying to shift. You know, Trump just, whether you like him or not, he just canceled, I forget how many millions of funds for conflict resolution. But I was at a conference years ago where I was sitting with people from the Pentagon in the United States and from West Point and stuff like that. And I made friends with a woman who was in the Green Zone. That was in Iraq during the Iraq War. And she told me, she said, you know what the military is talking about? The military is talking about that war doesn't work anymore. That war used to work. But now what works is going into villages and making friends with people, talking to people, doing the work on the ground. She said, we know that. We're trying to get the funds to change. That gives me chills. That was a woman high up in the United States Army. So we're on the verge of a paradigm shift. Maybe not in our lifetime, but we've got to try to create some new ways where you can bring the intensity of war, but there's no war. You can bring the intensity of physical conflict. I mean, when you watch somebody give you a good attack in Aikido, they are not tickling you. That's a serious attack sometimes, right? But we're learning alternative ways to deal with that. I think Sensei said once, if you hurt your opponent, you failed in your Aikido. I read a quote where he said that. That's an intense statement from a master martial artist, right? But when Mindell said we've got to rival the intensity of war, but create a different way of doing it. And one of the advantages of being on both sides is I hear the amount of suffering on both sides. When I've worked in other war zones, people sound alike on both sides. The same level of hopelessness, the same stories about what have happened to their children, to their nephew, to their friend in the army.
So to an Israeli who would tell you, you say all that and that sounds great, but there is no one to talk to on the other side. We've tried. We've had all these peace proposals. There's no one to talk to if they go into, no, that's not true. We're not all the same. There is Islamic fundamentalism there, which means that, you know, they revere death and we revere life. I mean, all these things that we've heard. What would you say? How do we know that what they're saying isn't ultimately true? How do we know that we don't have to all go into take our spears and weapons of mass destruction and attack each other so that one of us will remain alive? I mean, that's how people feel on a kind of existential level. So how do you talk to someone like that?
Well, first of all, even militarily, I don't think it's working. I've read accounts that in most areas, for more people you kill, more people show up wanting to fight. So I don't know if you can wipe out the other side, right? But if you do, what about all the casualties on your side? And how about the trauma sometimes takes years and years and years and years to work? I have a friend in Aikido who's a soldier. He was a sniper in Iraq and Afghanistan. One time he asked me in the locker room, he said, "Do you ever think I'll sleep again?" That's not winning. So I would say to those people, don't give up your doubts. Don't give up your hatred. Don't give up your prejudices.
It's valid.
Hang on to it.
Yeah.
Meet the other side. One quick story. I remember one workshop where a Palestinian brought her daughter to a conflict work. Suddenly there was one of my students' father came, and he laid down on the ground and began sobbing about his experiences being in a concentration camp. And I watched this girl, and she grabbed her mother and she said, "Mommy, look at that. Jews cry just like us." That was a moment. So I think we've got something that might work in Aikido. We're not saying in this work, don't defend yourself. We're saying defend yourself more effectively, right? Defend yourself more effectively. Defend yourself in a way that you can also feel good about, that fits your deepest values as a Jewish person, right? So it's not easy. And I understand war, and at times it's needed, and revenge and all that. But look at our world. I think at any one time I've read there's something like 75 wars going on. And the other thing about war is it is one of the main contributors to global warming. So it's not only you think you win, but you're destroying the atmosphere that your children need to breathe through. We've got to find a better way. It's sort of my purpose here. You know, I'm 72 and I hope I can still do some more about it. But that's what I've worked on every day is, can we teach something beyond war? I'm not against war. It's the method of conflict resolution that the world is now using, right? I think we can do better.
I call this podcast Raw because it's war backwards, and I think that they kind of mirror each other. The war and the rawness of our emotions, of kind of like stripping ourselves bare and seeing what we are at our most primal level. You know, these animals wanting to protect and destroy what we think threatens us. And the other title that I was thinking about was Wise Warrior, because in Buddhism there's this concept of the wise warrior, and I in the beginning of the war I kind of closed my eyes and I envisioned this kind of older warrior, male or female, you know, beaten down, exhausted, having seen so much suffering, and I just had this conscious vision. I just saw this warrior with the sword kind of, you know, dripping with blood, and the wise warrior knows when to put down their sword. They know when to kind of kneel and say enough is enough.
Yes. I just want to mention, too, we're talking about animals. One of my favorite teachers in college was Dr. Fox. Dr. Fox was this famous veterinarian psychologist who developed all this animal psychology. He had like all these wolves, and he would bring wolves to class. But he said, you know, wolves know when to stop. He said wolves have their battle. They will protect their young and stuff like that. But if the battle's with another wolf, there's a moment where one wolf will flip over and show their neck, and the battle is over. They do not destroy their species. So maybe we've even lost some of that natural connection where we know enough is enough. We've got to try something else. It's not going against war, but it's going beyond war.
Tell us more about Aikido and that kind of like visceral embodied experience of fight, of defense, of attacking. I don't know if you call it attack.
Yeah.
And then the principles that guide Aikido, which are that you, like Gary said, you don't want to harm your opponent. You want to defend, and defend in a way that does not harm your opponent. Tell us a little bit about that and how it has impacted you in the last year and a half of seeing this war where we both defend but also deeply wound and traumatize.
So just like a therapist is a model of a healthy relationship, a good therapist with their skill and training are actually going to help you go back and work through the things that were unhealthy in past relationships, and it's a model. So Aikido is also a model of a healthy conflict and how to help work through it in a healthy way. And you were just talking about the wise warrior, kind of I would say the core archetype of Aikido, and this is where it's a little bit different than other martial arts, is the spiritual warrior. And what is a spiritual warrior? If we look at if we take it down to the core principle, a warrior has to be willing, and here we are in very raw, still in war. A warrior has to be willing to take another life for a higher purpose. That's if you're not willing to do that, you'll fail at being a warrior.
You might be titled a pacifist, but you and your loved ones might die in the process.
There you go. A man or woman of spirituality, if you take it all the way to its conclusion, is willing to surrender their life for a higher purpose. Right? So these are diametrically opposed. When you bring them together as a spiritual warrior, you create a really tense dialectic. What the hell does that mean? That I enter conflict as a warrior, I enter that conflict for a greater good. Again, there's always the moral greater good thing. Now, whether it's actually moral or not, it's a whole other conversation, but let's just stay with the principle. You enter that for the greater good, and you're willing to go all the way. But as a man or woman of spirituality, you also enter it fully ready to sacrifice for the greater good. And when you bring those two things, it's like a Zen koan. When you bring those two things together, and you hold that with a capacity of awareness, together with technical skills or whatever methodologies that you've kind of internalized, then you have a beautiful model of conflict. And the other thing I would say about Aikido, I mean, I could talk a lot about the technical ways, but I think I'd rather say that like the old cliche, with great power comes great responsibility. Spider-Man. But it's true. So in a conflict, the person, the party that has greater awareness has a greater responsibility, just like you were talking about with your daughter. I have 2 kids as well, same age. When our kids are acting out and I'm starting to lose it, I realize, hang on a second, I'm the adult here.
Yeah.
I need to have a little bit more space. There'll be times where my 11-year-old say, "Dad, are you okay? Why are you so angry?" And I'm like, and then suddenly she's actually more mature in those moments. She has greater space, and that helps me. So that the person with the greater space has more responsibility to facilitate in one way or another the space for that. And then the person in conflict or acting out, they act out, it plays out, it's valid, as Gary was saying, it's valid, it plays out, and then you're still together in that same space.
For me, what mindfulness has given me in this past year and a half is that little bit of space, that I need with my kids, that little bit of space that I need when someone cuts me off in the road or when I read a horrible piece of news, is that kind of initial reaction in my body, which is to want to yell profanely or hit or lash at or destroy. We all have it in us. The desire to destroy that which we think threatens us. And then the mindfulness comes in to bring awareness to what's happening inside the body. So often in our modern life, everything happens so fast. By the time we've realized it, we've already yelled something profane at someone. The mindfulness comes in to say, my heart rate is very high. I'm feeling this tension in my belly. I'm feeling this heat in my cheeks and in my head. And that little bit of space allows me to decide if I want to have a different reaction, to react from a place that is wiser and more evolved. I kind of inhabit the more evolved parts of my brain. So that's what mindfulness has given me, but it's not easy. It's not easy when the winds of the world are so powerfully blowing against that. I really take with me, Gary, what you said about telling people who might say, in this time, how can you tell me to feel compassion to the other side? What are you, crazy? There's no one to talk to. They're evil, etc. Completely dehumanizing the other side for good reason, for understandable reason. And they might tell you, no, I can't imagine empathizing with the other side. And so I really appreciate what you said about stay with that outrage. Stay, if that's what you're feeling, stay with that desire for revenge. Stay with those feelings, but meet the other side. And I think that's the key. I mean, so few of us are willing to, because there's no safe space to do it, to meet someone, take the most, nonviolent, most Jew-loving, Israel-loving Palestinian and go meet that person. A lot of Israelis wouldn't feel the internal safety to do even that. And so I love that idea. And I think that if all of us could have that one interaction, maybe it wouldn't change the politics, it wouldn't change the kind of mindset of the leaders, but it would plant seeds where at the very least, like you said, that little girl saw that a Jew cries. I mean, that's where we're at, where so many of us can't even imagine that on the other side there is a person, a warm-blooded person who cares, who wants, who fears, who desires, who wants to be loved. So, yeah. Are there any kind of things that you'd like to share? Any other stories you'd like to mention?
Well, there is a step you can take. First of all, when the time is right, we will bring the sides together again in our work. It's not time now.
That's right.
Right? But when the time is right, we will do that. We did it for 25 years.
And why do you say the time is not right?
The tension is too great. The lack of safety is too great. The polarization. There are people who are doing it, but for me, now I'm listening to this side or helping them with their trauma, this side. But there is something you can do until you meet those people. And that is what we're calling this phase 3. Phase 3 means every time I have a fight with my wife, I start with phase 2. I usually do it in the shower. I make myself do phase 3. Phase 2, I am so right. I am so much more enlightened than she is. She's out there listening. My position is so justified, and I hold that. That's phase 2. And then I make myself do phase 3. Phase 3 is, how am I a little bit like that other side, or how do I need to be a little bit more like that other side? And I find that other side in myself. That's a very intense Aikido training, but it's psychological Aikido. I once was facilitating with my teacher, Arnold Mindell, and his wife, Amy. The neo-Nazis in Oregon were attacking the synagogue. They were shooting bullets through the windows of the synagogue. I invited in the head of the neo-Nazi right into the middle of the city with the mayor, and there was an anti-racism conference going on at the college. That room was full of those people, and they were full of police, and we facilitated. And that neo-Nazi at the end said, I will never stop preaching hatred, but I will stop using violence. That was already a big step. It was so controversial that I did that the city tried to ban process work from facilitating. And I couldn't really go out in public for months. I'd go into a restaurant and people would confront me. How could you relate to somebody like that? And I said, because he's less dangerous. He's more dangerous in the shadows. Bring him right into the middle of the room. Let us interact with him. But my teacher on the way out, he was always training me. And he said, find him in yourself. And I said, please don't ask me that. He said, find him in yourself. And I said, I read his newsletter. He calls me Gary the Jew. I have to find, yes. So I ran in the morning, every morning, trying to find him. No way I could do it. And I was going to tell my teacher, it's impossible.
You couldn't find the anti-Semite in you?
Couldn't find the neo-Nazi in me. One morning, I found it. He said, I'll never give up preaching hatred. And I said to my teacher, I'll never give up preaching love. I found him. His unwillingness, that I was too willing to get hopeless and give up. He said he would never give up. I needed one drop of him. That's phase 3. So everybody can do that on both sides. You can pick your biggest negative projection of the other side and find out where you're one drop like that, or you need to be somewhere in your life one drop like that. And what you do then is you stop making the other just other. The heart of propaganda is to make the other the other. Once the other is other enough, you can kill them. So this is the reverse process. They are not just the other. If we're humans, from the standpoint of quantum physics, we all share some molecules. We all share some electrons. So pick that up and make the first step. Not till you're ready. But when you get tired of hatred, when you get tired of fear, when you get tired of othering, when you get tired of reading about the casualties on both sides, this is a next step. Find out how you are a little bit like that. You know what Mendel told me? He told me that when he was working with world leaders, that they would do this exercise with him privately, even in war zones. But he said they were afraid to do it publicly because they would lose the elections, right? But there is a need in our consciousness to go beyond polarization. There is a part of us that longs for something beyond polarization. Even check it out. Practice with your relationship at home. When you think you are so much better and so much more right than your husband or wife or kid, start with that. And then use that discipline as a practice to find them in you. That changes how you also see the world, right? So those are little tiny practices that can make a difference, yeah.
There are some closing reflections that I wanted to bring to you that I thought about when I prepared to interview you. And the first is a poem from Yehuda Amichai, the Israeli poet, from a man in his life. And he says, "A man in his life has no time to have time for everything. He has no time to have a season for every purpose." Ecclesiastes was wrong about that. A man needs to love and to hate at the same moment, to laugh and cry with the same eyes, with the same hands, to throw stones and to gather them, to make love in war and war in love.
Amen.
Wow. Who was the poet's name? What's his name?
Yehuda Amichai, who was a wonderful Israeli poet. And then there is a teaching, a phrase from the Zohar, which says that there is light that emerges only from within the darkness. There are sparks hidden in the broken places. The task is not to flee them, but to uncover what glows.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Both of those reflect the transformation from polarization to polarity.
Yes.
And the polarity is really what we need.
And maybe that's a kind of Kabbalistic practice, is to take those sparks, you bring them back into the light. And that's a lot of what you do when you heal trauma, right? Is you take those parts of us that have broken to pieces and you help restore our wholeness.
And they become gifts to the world.
Yeah, I think that's a really beautiful point to end on, and something that we touched on just a little bit is the strength, the kind of transformation that can come out of trauma, right? Because we can stay at the status quo, but trauma can lead to post-traumatic stress disorder or post-traumatic growth, right?
That's the new word.
Yes, that's the new word.
Phrase.
Yes.
Trauma is a path. If you facilitate it and transform it, it's a path to power.
A path to wisdom, a path to compassion.
Power meaning compassion, wisdom, enlightenment. Yeah.
Thank you so much to both of you for your courage and your clarity and your ongoing work. And I look forward to seeing more of what you do. Toda rabba.
Toda rabba.